Words About Books is a bi-weekly book club podcast. And this month we are we're doing HP Lovecraft month. I am Nate and my co-host Ben is here, but he's not allowed to talk for a moment or a while, as the case may be, because I've got a lot to say about At the Mountains of Madness, which is what we're going to be covering this week, by H.P. Lovecraft, of course. So, first, let me start by saying, if you are one of those people who are deeply offended when you like something and random people on the internet don't like those things, now's the time to turn off the podcast. Okay? We've already got your view anyway. It's fine. But I don't have very nice things to say about Mr. Huge Phallus Lovecraft over here.
I mean, that was complimentary.
There. That's one. All right. Maybe I'll go for 3 of those. 3 whole compliments for this asshole. Okay. Now, if you think, maybe I'm being too hard, or maybe, I didn't read the good ones. I only read Shadows over Innsmouth and At the Mountains of Madness. I'm willing to give Lovecraft another shot. You can tweet at, what is it, WAB Pod?
Oh, the Twitter account I manage?
Yeah, you could tweet that one.
You could tweet Ben.
Yeah, tweet Ben. He can get back to me. I'm willing to read another one of his stories. But as soon as he starts repeating himself or making weird racial comments, I'm done. That's it. I'm done reading that story. Because I don't have time for this. And let me be clear, okay? When I was reading Dune, it was like 600 or 800 pages. I was working a full-time job and going to a postmaster's certification full-time. Right now, we're recording this in the summer, so school's out for the summer, and I'm temporarily not working. I'm furloughed. So when I say I don't have time to read Lovecraft, I really, I hate him so much. Let's just get into At the Mountains of Madness. A story that, if you did not read the title, you would still be able to figure out the title, because he uses the phrase Mountains of Madness about 400 times. He repeats himself over and over and over. Sometimes he just says the same things. Sometimes he uses the same words. You will see Cyclopean and... what else did he say? He said archaic. Just...
Archean.
Just over and over and over and over until your mind just becomes mush.
Decadent.
He says that probably every single paragraph once he comes upon the ruins. All right, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but...
Did you know Danforth wouldn't tell him what he saw?
Yes. And I also know
But he told him what he saw.
I also know that he doesn't want to tell the world what he saw, but he wants to dissuade this team, this new expedition, from going to Antarctica, so he's going to write it. Just give me a moment to write it in the next paragraph, I promise. He does that a lot, too. God damn.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give, because it sounds like you're ready to just jump in.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, so let me give just the quick, back of the book, I'm going to spoil it. If you haven't read The Mountains of Madness.
Oh no, I got this. I can give you the back of the book summary.
Okay.
All right. So a bunch of dipshits from New England go to Antarctica to dig up fossils and soil samples. I say they're dipshits because they've never been in an Arctic-like environment. And I was going to harp on that initially, but I've got so many other problems. That's the least of our problems. So they're going there to look for fossil samples and whatnot, and they find these... They're too complex of a fossil, and they're dated too far back. So it's something that shouldn't be there, but it is. And then as they explore, they find these complete specimens of, weird-looking alien creatures. And then those awaken and kill an entire group of people who went ahead, right? So Lovecraft, being the brave soul that he is, they decide to look for...
I'll take over. They find these complete specimens that date back millions of years, should not be there. And they leave the specimens out in the sun. They're like mummified or something. They're perfectly preserved. And as they leave them out in the sun, they warm up, they wake up, they kill everybody. Lovecraft was not with the expedition who dug up those particular fossils. He goes to find out what happened to them. I say Lovecraft, I mean the narrator.
Yes.
I forget. I don't think... Is the narrator ever named?
I think that they named him once.
Yeah, I forgot his name because he's just the whole time. He goes, he finds this carnage, and they decide to explore because there's one body missing, so they're going to maybe try to find that guy. As they're exploring, they find these giant fucking mountains, bigger than any mountains known on...
crazy non-Euclidean cylinders. Ooh!
Yeah, non-Euclidean is right up there with Cyclopean. And
in the sense that he doesn't know what either means.
Basically. And so he finds this city in the mountains, again, way too old, like older than complex life on Earth.
Well, even if it wasn't old, it's a fucking city in Antarctica and gigantic mountains.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Even if it were new, that would be fucking weird.
It's impossible to be there, according to everything science tells us. So they land, they start exploring.
They find an art mural that tells them the entire history. He uses decadent 400 fucking times.
He finds the murals that tell him the entire history. He finds out that there was this alien race that came to Earth, that made life on Earth, and they eventually, after several encounters with other alien species and several wars and just millions and millions of years, their civilization went into a decline that it never really recovered from. And then there's a twist ending where some of their own creatures wound up killing them, and those creatures are still out there. Ooh. And that's why nobody can go to Antarctica, which is the framing device of the story.
Oh, and don't forget there's another more evil mountain that is only briefly mentioned, and it's a reference to some other book, I guess.
Okay, so now that you know what happened in the story, let's dissect.
Well, let's go ahead and give him props, okay?
Okay.
Here's my second compliment of him, all right? These are great ideas. You're going to a wasteland no human's been to, no human is around. I mean, that's a really great horror setup, coming from a guy who doesn't really know shit about horror. And then they find weird fossils that can't exist. That's a mystery. That's really great. They find a city. Great, all right? But Lovecraft has this problem. And the problem is he either is dumb, or, like, he thinks we are way too dumb because he can't just describe something and let you, the reader, have an emotional reaction. He has to describe his emotional reaction, thinking that will somehow make you have an emotional reaction. So he goes on and on and on about, these crazy cylinders and cubes and, the archaic fossils. They're so mysterious and strange. It's like, I know they're mysterious and strange. I know these things should not be there. That's intriguing, but you can't get out of your own fucking way and just let the story speak for itself. And another thing, okay? I looked this up. The thesaurus was invented in like 1856. I suggest you buy one, sir. There are different words you can use for decadent, so I don't have to hear that word over and over and over again. It hurt me to have to read it repeatedly.
So I should probably say at this point, I didn't have as strong a reaction as you did.
This is one of his good ones! How?
This is my favorite one.
I can't even... It's like 5 to 10% great, and then it's just the rest is just shit because of the way he writes it. Like, if Guillermo del Toro, if he gets to make a movie of this, I bet that movie would be fucking awesome. That might be one of my favorite movies ever because he's gonna let the visuals speak, okay? He's not going to have a voiceover, and then I saw these cylinders and I was scared, but I decided to pursue on due to scientific inquiry. Or at the end, when they're running away, there's not going to be a voiceover, I decided to run away. Somehow I managed to gather my faculty. I get it. I know how fight or flight or freeze works, Lovecraft. You don't have to explain why you're afraid of the giant shambling monstrosity that's coming to murder you. I get it. I could understand that without you having to explain it.
Oh my God.
God!
So I will say, like, even I called that part out.
It frustrates me because there is good in this, but he just can't get the fuck out of his own way.
Oh dear.
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay.
I'll let you talk.
Okay. I actually reviewed this positively. I gave this...
How?
I gave this...
How?
I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I will totally acknowledge that Lovecraft, and I think other Lovecraft fans acknowledge this as well. His tendency to write in the first person
sucks.
It's always at odds with the story he's trying to tell. He has to come up with a reason to be writing in the first person because that's the type of writing he seems most comfortable with. He likes to tell you what he imagines happened to him. And so he creates these characters and these framing devices, and they always have to be some sort of like intellectual who isn't crazy, and they need you to know they're not crazy because what they're about to say is kind of crazy, but they either have proof or they're either like nearing the end of their life or their sanity and they don't care anymore. But for whatever reason, they need to make sure that what happened to them is recorded for posterity.
In the worst way possible.
His framing device is that of a scientist who survives the expedition, who is trying to dissuade other scientists from going to Antarctica to risk disturbing and alerting these monsters to the fact that humanity exists, because if they were to come after humanity, we would not survive it.
He does this by liberally quoting the Necronomicon and alluding to supernatural stuff.
That's the problem. You could say, when he's repeating himself and when he's trying to consciously avoid getting to the point, I think there is a part of him that acknowledged he was doing that and wanted to say it was due to the PTSD that the scientist had suffered. Like he didn't want to talk about it, and so he was purposely beating around the bush. I think Lovecraft was trying to convey a little bit of that, but
that's a good excuse for being bad at writing.
Well, it's
I decided to take my time and build it up over and over again, the exact same way as I did before.
It's still handled poorly.
What I saw next was really terrifying. I don't want to say it, but I'm gonna say it because I need you guys not to go to the Antarctic. I know I've said this 4 times previous to this, but for real, guys, I don't want to say this.
I mean, it's still handled poorly, and part of the framing device is that he's trying to cram in world building and references that this scientist probably, if he would not talk about. So like you said, he references the Necronomicon, and that's a problem because that would be like Stephen Hawking referencing Aleister Crowley's writing to dissuade you from looking at black holes. Like as soon as Stephen Hawking, respected scientist though he is, starts talking about, thelema and magic, most scientists are going to be like, okay, Stephen had a bit too much to drink. This is something you don't know, but it's mentioned in other Lovecraft stories. I think there are only 4 English copies of the Necronomicon, and one of them, conveniently, is in the Arkham University library.
Well, obviously, where else would it be if there were only 4 copies?
So a small New England college. And so these scientists are from Arkham, and many of them have read the Necronomicon. And what they see when they get to Antarctica is eerily similar to some of the things described in the Necronomicon. And that could be interesting. I think what he's trying to do is say that there were these legends of cities like this, and here we found something corresponding to the legends, which is sort of similar to like the Odyssey and Troy. Like for a while, Troy was thought to be fictional, and then they found the ruins of Troy. And so that sort of thing does happen, but he handles the framing device very poorly. And so the person comes off like very biased. So like as soon as he doesn't say like, oh my gosh, I found this mythical city, it must have been based in some truth. He immediately jumps to the conclusion that everything the person he titles as the Mad Arab said is true. And it's like, if you wanted to reference his work, I probably wouldn't start by calling him mad. I would probably say this recorder, like Homer is a poet. He's not
the Mad Greek.
Yeah. This would have been so much better as just a more traditionally written third person, either omniscient narrator or perspective that just told the story of the Antarctic expedition and their escape. He's very obviously not comfortable writing that way. But then there is a problem of there become times when he needs to dump a significant amount of lore that there's just no way this character could possibly know. And so in this story, he unbelievably has him learn all this from very detailed murals that, by the way, he only spends about 12 hours looking at.
And also, they're decadent, Ben. They're decadent. Their artwork is decadent.
That's another thing Lovecraft is obsessed with, and it comes out in this, is civilizational decline.
I wonder why.
I'm in an awkward spot here because, well, I did review
because people love Lovecraft and will come after us with pitchforks and torches.
I've read every piece of fiction Lovecraft has ever written. I'm not somebody who absolutely hates Lovecraft's writing. At the same time, every criticism you have of him is totally valid. and all I can say is they just didn't bother me to the extent that they bothered you. But you're not wrong. And so while I reviewed it favorably, I think what I focused on in order to give it a favorable review is the ideas he brought to the table. And I've read a lot of books from around Lovecraft's time. They're very, I don't know, for lack of a better word, dated. And Lovecraft's writing is certainly dated. But what he wrote about is very, I hesitate to call him forward thinking, but the topic of discovering that there was life on Earth before the life we know could have possibly evolved, the kind of ancient aliens theory is, Ancient Aliens is a hugely popular show on the History Channel. It's bullshit, but it's hugely popular for a reason. Like, that's an interesting idea. What if it were true? That would be neat. And so he was starting to think the fact that he was writing about aliens at all is very interesting. And the fact that he wrote about deep time is also interesting. And so I give him a lot of credit for being one of the first people to really broach these topics. And to some extent, he deserves credit for even really having thought about it, because there weren't a lot of people writing fiction novels about deep time in the 30s. So I do think, to some extent, he deserves credit for being first. If he were a better writer, he'd be legendary. There's this big debate over why Lovecraft is not taught in high school English classes alongside Poe. And the reason he's not taught is because he's not very good at the English part.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless the point of the class is, all right, let's go through and figure out if you could write it better. Yeah, probably could.
But would you have...
Because they teach you word choice All right.
But would you have thought to write it in the 30s?
Well, I didn't exist in the 30s as far as you're aware, so I can't comment on
That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people were just totally captured in the 30s or in the 40s when he started to get popular, the 40s and
So
50s.
did he start this though, or did he fall in with a crowd of friends who were into weird stories?
I'd say it's a little of column A and a little of column B. I think, as we talked about in that first episode in the series, there is a very concentrated and deliberate effort by Lovecraft's friends, particularly Derleth, to make him famous and also sort of massage his reputation and protect his reputation because, as we also pointed out, he's got a lot of really backwards ideas. And though he was very forward thinking when it comes to things like deep space and deep time, he was absolutely backward thinking when it came to things like social issues. And so he's a very complicated figure in that way, and that he's highly original in his writing. And he's also just technically very bad at it.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't give it. I would probably give this one 2 stars, whereas Shadows over Innsmouth, the lowest you can go was 1 star. That fucking sucked.
The ideas for me worked. Like when he's doing the big lore dump of all the stuff he learned from the murals, if that had been the whole book, I'd have been fine. Like if Lovecraft just sat down and wrote the Necronomicon, just a fictional encyclopedia of all these ideas he had, I think that would be great.
Or if he just was a better writer, that would be great too. Either one of these options would be better than what we got.
So,
like I said, I bet this would be a really great, mysterious, and suspenseful movie. I could see that very easily. Because you're right, okay? He has great ideas. All right? That's the entire... That seems to be our theme with Lovecraft.
that's my thing.
Because...
For sure,
Yeah, because his writing just is not there.
No, his prose is terrible. I mean, to each his own. You can prefer what you prefer, but I feel that Lovecraft's prose is as close to being objectively bad as one can get without making spelling errors and just general illiteracy.
Let me repeat that for people on the internet, because they don't ever seem to get it. This isn't an attack on you if you like Lovecraft. You can like whatever the fuck you want.
I like Lovecraft.
I think it sucked. I think he sucked.
I reviewed it favorably. So, I mean, you're getting...
I actually would have liked Lovecraft more had I never read his stuff, because I would have known him by reputation only.
Lovecraft is this kind of cult figure, and I do feel like the legend of Lovecraft, which again is the product of careful and deliberate marketing, has grown more and more distant from the man himself and his writing. I think the overwhelming majority of people wearing Cthulhu t-shirts have never read The Call of Cthulhu. They may have played a game, they may have played like Arkham Horror or Elder Sign or something like that, and that's fine. I'm not trying to gatekeep Cthulhu. I'm just saying, if you like that Cthulhu mythos, that cosmic horror, that's one thing. That's totally... I like that aesthetic too. And Lovecraft is the founder of it. But I wouldn't say I love Lovecraft until I've read Lovecraft. Because you may find that you don't.
Like me. Again, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt twice now. I knew a lot of the really bad racial stuff before I read the books, but I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then after I didn't like The Shadow over Innsmouth, I went into At the Mountains of Madness thinking this one will be different somehow. This one's going to be better. And it is better, but still not great. Not even good, I would say. I would say, at best, mediocre.
Yeah, of course it's mediocre. You got to keep this in mind too. He's essentially an amateur writer who achieved like legendary fame, which he did not achieve or enjoy in his lifetime.
Can we find someone who can market us as if we're great
after we're dead?
Damn.
But he gets better as he goes on. He's an amateur writer learning how to write by writing. And if you look at Lovecraft's work, like chronologically, start to finish, which we are not doing in this series, and so don't fault Nate for that. He starts off kind of mimicking Poe.
Or anything. Don't fault me for anything.
He starts off mimicking Poe. And then he starts to find his own style, his own topics, and he's getting better at writing as he goes. Shadow over Innsmouth, really, his attempts to build suspense totally failed. But in this book, he
That's interesting. I just looked up to Kelly Lee. Is that how you say that?
I have no idea.
Apparently, that's what it says on Google. That's from Poe.
Yes. He says that in the book, Nate.
Okay, I definitely started skimming because he just could not advance that narrative fast enough.
So what I was going to say, though, is he does a better job of organically building suspense in this one than he did in Shadow over Innsmouth. And the specific example I would reference is the character of Lake, who is... There's a team of scientists on this expedition. Our main character, the person telling the story, is a geologist. I almost said geographer. Sorry. I'm not that smart either. So our main character is a geologist, and Lake is another scientist who is a paleontologist. And Lake finds the first fossil. And essentially what he finds is a footprint that is basically right after the Earth cooled. It's way too old. Multicellular life was not even a thing at that point. So he becomes obsessed. And through his obsession, suspense is built. The main characters are excited for him, but we kind of get the vibe that he's getting a little scary. And as he finds the intact specimens, then he starts going crazier, and he starts dissecting them, and he starts describing this creature that is like really powerful and just cosmically strange and totally alien to all life on Earth. And when all of a sudden he's describing it, and like the dogs don't like the smell of them, and then all of a sudden the radio transmissions stop. And that is probably the peak of the story for me. As soon as the radio transmissions stop, it's like, okay, we're in a horror story now. And they're going to go find it, and they're going to find some shit. And then it's going to be on. And then
it's going to be on very slow.
He gets to the camp, and he finds the humans and the dogs just totally mutilated, and it's pure carnage. But the incomplete specimens, the ones that were dead, are buried in a ritualistic manner. And the complete specimens are missing. And so, of course, we, the reader, know that the complete specimens have come to life. And this is where the framing device gets in the way again, because you could argue that a scientist wouldn't think that. A scientist wouldn't think something millions of years old could come back to life like that. But then a scientist probably wouldn't be referencing the Necronomicon, now would they? So this scientist who references the Necronomicon cannot bring himself to make the connection. And Lovecraft even acknowledges that by saying deep down the scientist didn't want to make the connection. He was too afraid of it to even engage with these ideas.
He was too afraid to believe that they came back, but not afraid enough to like leave immediately. He decided to follow them.
Yeah. And then as they're going through the city, that is the most painful piece. Even I have to admit, I find myself skimming.
I had to skim here. This was the part where I just was like, okay, you need to move the fuck on. And it wasn't just being in the city. He takes a while to just go there. He's describing the cylinders and flying over them. And the cylinders again. And it just goes on and on, seemingly forever. Lovecraft, his book is meta for cosmic horror because I felt like my brain was just eroding away as I read this.
So
I was becoming mad.
He's always trying to describe something that can't be described. And it never works for him. And that I've mentioned that before. I mentioned it in the Shadow over Innsmouth too. It's a problem he never cracks. The things that his characters are seeing are beyond human intellect.
Which again is a problem with being first person.
Yes.
Because you can be more vague from the third person. And that's when they saw something that they couldn't comprehend and blah, 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 go from there.
Yeah.
You don't have to describe it then.
But because the problem is, you did see something, and you can describe it.
You are actively describing it to me, sir.
And when you say the building was a cylinder, I'm like, okay.
Ooh, spooky.
Never look at a grain silo, man. That's gonna blow your fucking mind.
He describes it as a cylinder, but not. The angles were a little weird, you know. It's similar, but it's different. It's like, well, what the fuck does that mean?
And then he describes everything that's big as Cyclopean, which is not what Cyclopean means. I think what he's trying to say, essentially, is that the structures that exist here, they feel wrong because they're defying physics. Like, they're just too large to be supported by what's supporting them. Their shapes should collapse. How are these things engineered in such a way that they can exist? And I think that's what he's trying to describe, is that it's just so counterintuitive to his understanding of physics and his understanding of like architecture and construction that it's blowing his mind. And I think Lovecraft probably thought about describing it that way and then realized, but that doesn't sound scary enough. But the thing is, Lovecraft, it does. It does sound scary enough because you're demonstrating that the alien race has a deeper understanding of physics than you do. And that's all you need. I did not make you read a story called The Color Out of Space, specifically because Lovecraft spends a significant chunk of time trying to describe a color that no one has ever seen.
Yeah, okay. Has he ever tried to describe colors to a colorblind person?
Well,
it's about as easy, okay?
Here's the problem.
Isn't that a joke in Futurama? I saw an amazing sign. It had all the colors of the rainbows, and also some I've never seen before.
That's how he talks. It's a third color. It's Terry Pratchett's...
Except Futurama is a comedy!
Well, it's Terry Pratchett's Color of Magic. It's Octarine. But... there's some legit creepy moments in Color Out of Space, just like there's some legit creepy moments in At the Mountains of Madness. But Color Out of Space, the constant effort to describe the color is terrible. I mean, just like the human eye can only see so many colors. There, believe it or not, and this is what I'm sure the story is based on. There are colors we can't see. And that's probably what frightened him enough to write the story. Somebody probably told him, there's this thing called ultraviolet light.
Oh my god! What if the ultraviolet light tried to kill all of humanity?
Essentially, yes.
Well, it is, okay?
Yeah, that's true. It can kill you.
Skin cancer.
Yeah. But, yeah, I chose At the Mountains of Madness because, for me, this was cosmic horror at Lovecraft's peak.
Oh my god.
This is...
I was holding out that maybe Call of Cthulhu was better.
No.
I was still trying to give this asshole the benefit of the doubt.
So I would say this. This, At the Mountains of Madness, is the least offensive Lovecraft story from a racial component.
Oh my god. Yeah, he actually compliments the elder ones. Like, oh,
he grants them human status.
Yeah, he was just like, oh, they reacted that way, but we would have reacted the same way if we had just woken up and our friend was dissected and we're in a weird land and we were just lashing out. It's like
you're so close, Lovecraft.
Yeah,
you're so
you almost
close.
got it.
You almost understood humanity.
So we're reading Pickman's Model and Cool Air next time, right? 2 short stories?
Yes, we're doing 2 short stories.
I will also read Call of Cthulhu until he starts repeating himself, and I will let you know how many pages I make it in before that happens.
Okay. I'm going to give you 5. He does get a little weird when he sees the murals and the race is going, like the alien race is going well for about a couple 100 million years. And then, towards towards the last 3 million years, they start losing technology. And that's where the decadent comes into play. And then after that, he can...
God, if only Rome hadn't been so decadent and fallen.
That's a big thing for him.
Oh, I know.
And, well...
I could tell.
I want to say, too, though, that aside from the weird racial component he brings to it, I'm not, like, obviously the people who followed Rome were not inferior to Rome. As, you know, it would be a silly thing for someone who was descended from such people to think that. Lovecraft. But it is fascinating to me that technology can indeed be lost, and what we think of as progress can be reversed. Because in our recent history, it has been nothing but a forward march of increasingly complex technology. And the idea that it could be anything but that is scary and just weird. But the truth is that has happened.
And then anti-vaxxers came.
The idea Lovecraft brings there, that there was once this great civilization brought to ruin, is also really interesting to me. Because I wouldn't be surprised to learn that, like, the American Empire peaked in 2016, and it's just downhill from here.
2016? Why 2016, Ben?
I don't know. I just pulled that out of thin air, man. We got to talk about...
the fact that Lovecraft hates penguins for no discernible reason.
I guess we should talk about that. And that's
what the fuck is his problem?
I don't know. That pissed me off, man.
Like, he even in the first chapter, he's like, there's just some grotesque penguins. Fuck you. What penguins ever do to you?
Yeah, no, he dumps like all his like pent up racism into penguin hate. And I'm like, dude. He's like the grotesque squawking, the awful bloody penguins and their fins, and it's like, no, they're wings, Lovecraft. They're they're still birds. Like
he called them fins.
He calls them fins.
What a fucking idiot!
I wanted to talk about the Shoggoth.
Hey, now I actually know what the fuck those things are, because he mentions them in Shadows over Innsmouth, or The Shadow over Innsmouth, but he never really mentioned what the fuck they were back then.
No. Lovecraft is very self-referential. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So there's a scene. He finds out that the last of the great old ones who live... Not the great old ones, sorry. The elder beings or something. I think the great old ones are a different thing. The last of this alien race, as the climate was changing, they decided to abandon the city above ground in favor of a city in an underground lake. And to construct that city, they riskily employed the use of Shoggoths, which had previously rebelled. Now, Shoggoth is basically a mound of organic matter that can create limbs and organs as needed.
You're turning me on.
And the old ones controlled them by means of what Lovecraft calls hypnotic suggestion. I'm going to go ahead and say like psychic telepathy before that had become a mainstream term.
Yeah, that's what I figured, because hypnotic suggestion sounded stupid. I was like, it's probably like they use their minds to touch their mind. That makes more sense. I don't think they got out a pocket watch and dangled it in front of the Shoggoth and went, "You're getting very sleepy."
But yeah, so over millions and millions of years of psychic impressions building up in these Shoggoths, they eventually developed like a weird facsimile of consciousness, and they rebelled. But it was kind of like a mindless rebellion, like they just kind of broke, and it was like robots that just switched into kill mode. They didn't really understand what they were doing.
Damn it, we shouldn't have built them with that.
Yeah. I figured out that the killbots had a pre-programmed kill limit. So I sent wave after wave of men at them. The Shoggoths, they did manage to bring them back under control, but it was always risky to use them after that. And so, of course, guess what happened?
Could they have just melted all the Shoggoths down and then just made new ones?
Well,
Would that have worked?
No, I don't think so, because the way you grow a new Shoggoth is you cut a piece off of a Shoggoth.
So what they should have done is they should have kept one Shoggoth just like in a container without any psychic impressions.
Right.
And then just use that to grow a new batch every single time.
My understanding is by the time they figured out what was going on, it was already too late.
I mean, yeah, that's probably
They'd already corrupted all the Shoggoths, and one of the technologies they lost over time was the ability to create new life from inorganic matter. So they couldn't create...
That's They should have recorded that into a giant mural that they could reread and figure out how to do it.
I was going to say, I was very surprised at how much technology they lost, considering their amazing mural work. As they descend, of course, we find out that the elder beings that had survived had followed the same steps Lovecraft had, and they arrived first at the Undercity and were promptly decapitated by the evil Shoggoth. And when Lovecraft and Danforth see the Shoggoth, they know, like, oh shit, we gotta get out of here. But what bothered me the most about this scene, well, there's two things.
He was analyzing how he could possibly have the mental facilities to run away, and he completely destroyed all tension by doing that.
There are 2 pages of text between him seeing the Shoggoth and choosing to run from the Shoggoth.
Call them what they are. Walls of text. Non-Euclidean walls of text. Just kept growing larger and larger the more you read them.
Anyway, what bothered me the most is that the Shoggoths are described as white, shapeless masses that can take on any form, and that they imitate the things around them, right? So as he's going down, they pass these, like, passive, blind, giant, white penguins. They're like 6-foot-tall penguins, and all they do is squawk and waddle. And he mentions...
It's grotesque.
And he mentions that there's no, like, what could they eat? How did they get here? What are these penguins? And I'm waiting for him to, like, get all the way down and see something. And then there's some, like, sound or some scream goes out. And then all of a sudden those penguins melt into these Shoggoths and they come at him. But no, they're just fucking big penguins.
Yeah.
They're just big, dumb penguins.
That's all.
That's it. They're in the story for absolutely no reason.
They're there so he can insult penguins again. He couldn't insult the regular penguins enough, so he had to throw in new penguins. Have I ever mentioned that my mom really loves penguins and she collects them? Like various art and, like, plushies and all sorts of shit. Like, I once counted, like, 300 penguins in her house.
Well, your mom and Lovecraft would not get along.
No!
So I gotta ask, what did you think of the Shoggoth reveal now that you finally encountered one in the wild?
Here's the thing. Any tension that might have existed melted just like that Shoggoth. Look, it sounds like a really scary monster. I certainly wouldn't want one coming after me. I certainly wouldn't want to have to look at one in real life. That sounds horrible. But 2 walls of goddamn text telling me about how your brain is functioning to keep you running away and also to not pee yourself.
How did you like the Scooby-Doo escape through they lost him in a tunnel?
Yes. He also goes into great detail about how he was leaving paper behind. He was tearing up paper and leaving a trail.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's almost like, I don't want you to follow in my footsteps, but here are my exact footsteps and how to follow them. Here's the longitude and latitude at which we found the city. Here's how we navigated it. Here's where we landed. The winds are okay at this altitude.
Don't go to this location. That works every single time, right?
People are really good at not doing what you tell them not to do. They always listen to sound advice. Would you like to engage in a little bit of bad faith criticism?
Oh, yes. Oh, please. Let's do. What are we doing?
I have several nitpicky bad faith criticisms of this book.
All right.
So, I mean, first of which being Antarctica was much less explored in the time when Lovecraft wrote this, so he gets tons of that shit wrong. To my knowledge, there are not giant mountains. I mean, not the size he was talking about in Antarctica. So, whoopsie doodles. But second, and perhaps most notably to me, is the planes that they just keep assembling and disassembling and could take off with no runway and are on skis but also carry giant loads.
And aren't pressurized.
And fly at 24,000 feet with the windows open. When he said that, I couldn't hear Danforth because we had to keep the windows down for navigation. This man, at 24,000 feet, thinks he's looking out a window because the windshield's fogged up.
I like how he actually takes the controls towards the end. He's like, hold on, I don't know how to fly a plane, but like, it can't be that hard. I'll move. I'll take the driver's seat.
No, it's like
driving a car, right?
I was going to say like driving a horse, right? I mean, you just, wacha. Yeah, so the 24,000 feet was fun. Especially since they're, up at I think they
don't have any oxygen, though.
Yeah, they don't have any oxygen. They land at like a height that's higher than the peak of Everest.
See, I'm glad that you went into this because I mentioned I wasn't going to go into this because there's just so much worse to go into. But I'm glad that you're doing it.
Yes, I got to do a bad faith criticism corner. I'm sorry. Because the plane thing kept bothering me. I was fine. I could excuse everything until he said we had the windows down. And I was like, no, you fucking did not, sir. No, you did not have the windows down at 24,000 feet. They land at 24,000 feet. They're climbing around. They're running. They're doing stuff. And he does mention, like, we were really out of breath from the thin air. And I was like, you have no fucking clue.
You would die very quickly at that height.
And
you Googled it.
I did Google it. And I will totally forgive placing giant mountains in Antarctica that were later found to not be there. He couldn't have known that. That's fine. I mean, he was writing about a mystery at the time. It was something that was bound to not age well as Antarctica was explored further. But the plane thing and the altitude thing, people had been to Everest by then. You could have looked that up.
He could have also gotten a thesaurus, Ben. And we both know he didn't do that.
So, and I guess my bad faith criticism brings me around to another point of why do we expect Lovecraft to be better? Because essentially what Lovecraft is he's extreme pulp. He is his writing past fewer gatekeepers than a pulp novel of the time would have. And he was writing almost exclusively to an audience of other writers of weird stuff. So this was less a novelist working and putting out literature than it was a guy swapping stories with his friends. He was closer to Eden than any of the other writers we have ever read.
And yet, he is probably the second or possibly third most well-known that we have read for this podcast.
But in fairness to the man himself,
I'm not going to be fair to him.
He did not benefit one iota from that fame. He did not experience or enjoy any success in his lifetime. He never made enough money on his stories to even pay 1 month's rent. He was writing for fun. It was a hobby of his. And granted, he probably wanted to turn it into a profession, but he was not willing to put in the work. And that's why it's so self-referential, and that's why it brings in the work of other authors you've never heard of. Because he was writing for the audience of Weird Tales magazine. And Weird Tales magazine was read by a bunch of people who were into like indie publishing. And the fact that he had any good ideas at all is, that's not nothing. I can't say he's the greatest. I can't say he deserves his level of fame because his stories are about on par with, I'd say like the early comic books that were coming out around the same time, like creepy comics or eerie comics, EC stories where it was like 6 pages of story that like very quickly it's like, I'm a werewolf and I'm a soldier and I'm in World War II and I kill Nazis. Like those were the stories. Like it was
sounds like great work to me.
I enjoyed them though. Like
I'm sure.
They're fun for what they are. I don't think they're high art. I don't think Lovecraft is a good writer, but it doesn't prevent me from enjoying his stories. The fact that he's famous, I don't judge him more harshly because of his level of fame.
See, maybe you should, come into this saying that to me, because I was expecting great stuff because of how famous he was. And then it just wasn't good.
I couldn't have been more clear.
Yeah, you probably were.
You just didn't believe me.
I didn't want to believe, Ben.
You didn't believe it was going to be as bad as it was.
No. Can you blame me?
No, but that's also why I actually really value your perspective in these Lovecraft episodes, because Lovecraft is such an important figure in horror, a subject which fans of this podcast may know I'm very passionate about, and you, knowing nothing about him other than the hype, are like the perfect fish out of water point of view character for an audience who has not read Lovecraft. You are a person who does not care about the horror genre that much. You're not hyped on him. You don't care much one way or the other. You're going into it with a totally open mind, and you see the problems that are there. Now, do you think if you had been a regular reader of like Weird Tales magazine, if you paid like $1 a month, not even that, it was probably like 10 cents back in the 30s, which would have bought you a candy bar, I guess. So for the price of a candy bar, you buy this magazine that has a bunch of these stories in it, and you read them, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are okay. And they all kind of reference each other, and it's fun, and it's playful. Like, I don't know, this is kind of like the web comics of its day. I keep bringing it back to comic books because I have a lower standard of writing for comic books than I do for novels. But, and I guess for serialized fiction in general. Serialized fiction where you put it out every month and you don't necessarily write at your own pace or plan it as well. I have a lower bar. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say you gotta put him in his context.
I feel like I do have to repeat this. You're allowed to like Lovecraft, okay? Don't at me, bro.
Yeah, please don't at him because he doesn't manage the Twitter.
Exactly.
You're only going to punish me, and I liked this story.
Actually, at me. WAB Pod is our Twitter. Ben will he'll circulate those comments over to me, most of which will be threats against my life.
One of the funniest things is I guess there's really no way to convey to the listeners what the experience of you reading the story was like, but it caused you like physical pain.
Oh God.
I got texts from Nate every day for the last week. Like, I can't do this, man. I'm so done. I drank a pot of coffee trying to stay awake reading this. This is fucking awful.
I actually had to drink coffee before doing this podcast. Because I figured after I went on my rant, I would just be exhausted. Like you were with that other book that was actually inspired, in part, by Lovecraft.
Would you say Lovecraft is your least favorite thing we've read?
Yes, by far. Hey, he's got better ideas than some of the other authors.
He does.
But his writing just gets in his own way. And we've repeated that so often. I should probably just stop, but it's true.
It's like Bob Dylan trying to sing.
How a bunch of other artists have done all his songs like better.
He's an amazing. Now I'm gonna get added for sure. He's an amazing songwriter, one of the best. But goddamn, he cannot sing, and he just keeps singing. And it's like if you just gave the song
to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, wasn't All Along the Watchtowers a Bob Dylan cover?
Yes, it was. And Jimi Hendrix did it like 1 billion times better.
So much better that I didn't know for like 20 years it was a Bob Dylan song.
I was introduced to that through the Jimi Hendrix version. A ton of artists have covered his songs and probably did it better.
So yeah. that's how you should think. Yeah. So
I guess there's no shame in that. All right.
That's a compliment to Lovecraft. Then he's like the Bob Dylan of horror.
I was gonna say like me. Like I piggybacked onto someone who can write much better than me, and you can buy that for $5 on Amazon for the price of a candy bar. You can get a collection of our work.
Does Lovecraft just hit too close to home for you? All right, man. Let's wrap this up.
I lied at the beginning of our podcast. It's bi-weekly, except for this month. It's every week. So next week, we're going to do Pickman's Model and Cool Air. I've been told Cool Air is just going to be so great. Not because of the writing,
brace yourselves, because Nate knows nothing about Cool Air. If you do, you may have realized why I chose it for Nate.
Health professional Lovecraft.
Yes. So, expect Cool Air to just be one long bad faith criticism corner. We are going to get full-blown nitpick on Cool Air. And then Pickman's model I actually like. So we're gonna round it out with that one.
And I'm also going to tell you how many pages I make it in Call of Cthulhu before he either repeats himself a bunch or he starts getting real racial and mean.
Why don't you tell the people what we're doing after Lovecraft?
All right. Well, I made Ben pick from 10 books, and that should be up by now, or will be going up, whatever. And he decided on, he and no one else, decided on how to pick up women with a drunk space ninja. The Adventures of Duke Lagrange by J. Key.
All right. That was the second take. You want to do a third, or are we just rolling with that?
There's another one. How to win at pit fighting with a drunk space ninja.
You can find us on Twitter at WABpod. Please check out our Goodreads group. It is the best way to stay up on top of what we are reading. We're going pretty hard over on Goodreads. You just go to Goodreads, go to the groups section, and look up Words About Books podcast. You can also check out our own writing at poorlywritten.ninja, where you'll find that Edenverse we're always talking about for free. You do not need to purchase it.
But you can. The option is available to you.
And last but not least, for additional show notes and commentary, we have also been very active on blog.wordsaboutbooks.ninja. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what we can do better. We've already gotten a lot of great feedback from some of the listeners, and we're going to be incorporating some of your ideas into the podcast for season 2, which we will be announcing in the coming months. And yeah, thank you for listening as always, and we will see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.